ever heard a phrase that Ukraine is a state which will never miss a possibility to miss a possibility? I want to tell you a story, my story in a story of my country. A story of a young Soviet-born child, a man, who got a chance to a little bit push its own country, not as Ukrainian USSR, but as Ukraine. What do you know about USSR? Uncle Joe, Perestroika, Cold War. These words cause a lot of emotions. A lot of people live in nostalgia about sausage, about 2 and 20, about cheap medical care, about cheap traveling, about free of charge education. They still named our Ukrainian currency hryvnia, not hryvnia, but ruble, because of Soviet one. They have a nostalgia. But when you ask them, what is about your grandfather or grandmother or their parents? And when you hear terrible stories, stories of like this man executed in 1937 with his sister and with his brother during 1 month. His wife was sold to Karlak, a terrible camp in Kazakhstan. Could you imagine that you can't go to the church? You have no church, no mosque. You have only one church called the Museum of Lenin. Could you imagine that if someone finds out that you are LGBT, you will be in jail? Could you imagine that you're a journalist, you want to tell a story about bad roads or bad corrupted guys, but you don't, because Soviet media will never print it out. Moreover, you will be watched by KGB if finally you will appear in jail. All Soviet people discussed all these problems. Of course they did, but they did it in their kitchen. And even there was no safety, because sometimes you can find that your husband, your wife, your friend, co-worker could be an agent of KGB, like this one. A life in USSR was about a human being in very strict measures. Your life was predicted. You go to kindergarten, you go to school, you go to some technical school. You passed all this type of communist Baptist, like sterilizing, like pioneering, and so on. Then you got a job from 8:30 till 6 p.m. for 25 years. You will always try to find food, not quality food, but just food. You will always try to find any goods. You will stay in long queues to buy a furniture, to buy a car. That was the life which you're able to live as a Homo Sovieticus in the empire of the great prison of nation. But the empire failed. In the 80s, a lot of Soviet parents, especially Ukrainian ones, got a very terrible cargo called Cargo 200. We face it now. We hear this name every week because of war on Donbass. On those times, it was a war on Afghanistan, war for nothing. And next one, there was a Chernobyl, a great crime of Soviet power. In summer of 1986, there was no kid in the capital of Ukrainian USSR. Me too. Everyone was taken out. My story started in USSR. I was born in the USSR. But I have all these executed, resettled, and so on relatives. But I lived in fear. I must be silent, because USSR it's about fear. And that's why in 1991, Ukrainians go and vote for independence. And that's why in 2004, we go to streets, and it's about honesty. And that's why in 2013, we go to the street, and it's about dignity. When I got an offer to start an NGO in 2004, I was a student. I had no idea what is activism, lobbying, and blah, blah, blah. But I understand that I don't want to live in fear, and I could do something. I didn't know what, but I could. You know, at that time it was a jump on a fresh photo. Yesterday you take your classes, and today you sit with MP in discussing a law, draft law. Law about public service broadcasting must be applied, but not. It was failed. And it will start a very long journey for near 10 years, boring journey, but till 2014. In 2014, we started the Maidan. In 2014, on the 2nd of January, we discussed about our future. It was a birth of great coalition, which is still present, called RPR, Reanimation Package of Reforms. Just 4 months later, we passed the law on public service broadcasting. I had only 20 hours on those years to amend this law, to pass an amendment, and I did it. And it was signed. First time the law was signed on air in 2015. But after that, we've got sabotage. Sabotage of the frightened people who still wear a fear of communist power, of communist time. But there is another one, young, modern. They wear Vyshyvanka, but they wear it as a respect for Archaic, but they wear with the jeans. We passed 2 years to push this law into force. It was really terrible time. We have no national memory archive, but we passed the law. And a lot of people found the stories about their relatives. We created public service broadcasting last year, 2017, but still we're fighting for independence. When old man was asked, why you plant an apple tree? You will never eat apples from it. An old man told, yes, I'm not, but my grandson do. Thank you.